Can't even go to bed. Clicked another video, and the so-called left, the fucking downers, they're just they cannot stop. All they can do is try to tear things down, point fingers. They don't have a point, they don't have a goal. Look at my video on fascism where I talked about how fascism doesn't have a goal. It doesn't want to do anything. It's just looking for people to blame for everything so that they can continue on their charade of power. That's why I left the Democratic Party 8 years ago. And I'm not in a party. Because for leftists like me, there's nowhere to go. Because I'm sick to my stomach of this bullshit. 10 plus years, 20 years of this nonstop. And it just gets worse. And they never fucking learn their lesson. So, let's watch.
Well, Donald Trump was just cornered with a list of right-wing political terrorism attacks after he spent weeks trying to build this story where political violence in America comes from the left, Antifa, Black Lives Matter, flag burners, sort of the usual caricatures. And then yesterday, the entire thing collapsed because standing in the Oval Office, CBS reporter Nancy Cordes finally did what journalists should have been doing for a very long time, and that's putting the receipts right in front of Donald Trump. Now, we've known for a long time that overwhelmingly political violence in the United States is right wing. That doesn't mean we excuse left wing instances of it. It doesn't mean we condone violence. It doesn't mean that we say that violence of any kind or using guns to solve political or cultural social problems is okay. Of course not. We denounce all political violence, but we also don't miss the forest for the trees and delude ourselves into believing that this is overwhelmingly or even disproportionately a left-wing problem. And so Nancy Cordes said, hold on, Mr. President. We have, of course, the assassination of Charlie Kirk, whose motives, by the way, we still don't know. And as
Yeah, we do. But, he posted this an hour ago, so that's disingenuous. And by the way, I don't like criticizing people unless I hear them out, so I want to listen first,
complicated and convoluted as they
however painful that might be.
might be, we simply don't know right now whether the motivations were left or right wing. But what about the example of Minnesota Democrat Melissa Hortman?
Okay, Representative Melissa Hortman, killed by Vance Bolter. In a series of cryptic notes to the New York Times through his jail's electronic messaging service, Bolter suggested his actions were partly rooted in the Christian commandment to love one's neighbor. Because I love my neighbors, prior to June 14th, I conducted a 2-year-long undercover investigation. There is little evidence showing why he turned to political violence and extremism. Conspiracy nut. A mentally ill conspiracy nut. Could have been right influenced. Can't really call him right.
Just months ago. What about the attack against Paul Pelosi in his own home? What about the
Okay, let's look at Paul Pelosi. Paul Pelosi was killed by DePape. He planned to take Speaker Nancy Pelosi hostage and interrogate her. Prosecutors believe the attack to be politically motivated. DePape, a Canadian immigrant to the United States, had a history of mental health issues and drug abuse. Before the attack, he had embraced various far-right conspiracy theories, including QAnon, Pizzagate, and Donald Trump's false claims of a stolen election in 2020. So yes, there was some very far-right fringe conspiracy theories and extremist organizations, if you can call them that, that influenced this guy. Canadian immigrant, mental health issues and drug abuse, and started soaking up some extreme far-right. I don't even know why they call this really far-right. Like the QAnon people, the Pizzagate people, the people that were on Donald Trump's false claims of a stolen election. Well, that's where the right is fucked up. And that's where Donald Trump is not helpful. And there are people that get influenced by stuff like that. Donald Trump is, you know, he's a 50-50 guy too. You can agree with 50% of what he does, and the other 50% is batshit crazy. Some of the things he does is really, really good. Some of the things he does are painstakingly stupid. So it is what it is.
Shooting of Gabby Giffords. What about the attack?
Gabby Giffords. Jared Lee Loughner, the paranoid schizophrenic who was diagnosed and incompetent to stand trial. Mental health issue. He was placed on medication while in jail as part of his treatment. He was again judged incompetent a little bit later.
Attack on the Pennsylvania governor's mansion, where, by the way, I was just yesterday with Governor Shapiro looking at where that damage recovery has been taking place and getting a firsthand look at that terrifying arson attack. What about that? I saw it firsthand.
What about that? One of the Pally terrorist, Jew-hating people did that. They're on the left. And they're pretty mainstream left. Unfortunately now. The people that should be the most opposed to Islamic theocratic political system are allying themselves with it. And they've been brainwashed and infiltrated by it. So, what the fuck is he talking about? He named 4 murders, 4 incidences, multiple people murdered in a few of them. One of them had ties to right wing and was influenced by right wing. And the collected evidence in that case, which was this one, he was a Canadian immigrant. He had health issues and drug abuse. And then he was soaking up conspiracy theories, including QAnon and Pizzagate. So the one thing that you could say about him that he was influenced by right wing was that he soaked up the Donald Trump false claims of a stolen election. But Canadian immigrant, health issues, drug abuse, QAnon, Pizzagate, okay, fuck it. Let's throw Pizzagate in there too. Pizzagate and Donald Trump's false claims of a stolen election. Out of all the list of things that influenced him. But he's right wing. No credit taken, no accountability taken on the left side. Just throw all of that, let's categorize him as right wing and blame that as right wing political violence. I'd say 20, let's be honest, let's be even generous. Let's say 30% right wing political violence. Okay. So out of the whole list that he just gave us, claiming that these were a skew of right-wing political violent attacks and incidences, one of them had about a 30% influence from the right wing and the very far right-wing fringe.
And yesterday, and for a very brief second, I mean, this is like very, very brief, you could see that Donald Trump was cornered here.
Do you think it would have been fitting to...
Cornered? He's embarrassing himself. Let's watch him.
...lower the flags to half-staff when Melissa Hortman, the Minnesota House Speaker, was gunned down by an assassin as well?
Question was, do you think it would have been appropriate to lower the flags to half-staff when Melissa Hortman, the House Speaker for the Minnesota government, was gunned down?
I'm not familiar. The
Minnesota House Speaker, a Democrat, was assassinated this summer.
Well, if the governor had asked me to do that, I would have done that. But the governor of Minnesota didn't ask me. I didn't. I wouldn't have thought of that. But I would have if somebody had asked me. People make requests for the lowering of flag, and
it's always someone else's fault.
Oftentimes.
Well, yeah, when you're a so-called leftist downer, you always blame everybody else, right, David?
Sometimes you have to say no because it would be a lot of lowering. The flag would never be up. Had the governor of Minnesota asked me to do that, I would have done that gladly.
And given the killing.
Now, wait. My channel, I speak first. Now, I'm actually surprised that he allowed his entire response to that. And he cut some of the rest of it out, but, you know. Completely valid, reasonable response. I don't really like Trump that much. I don't like the way he talks. I don't want to blame people for the way they talk, but he's a character and he's annoying. But I listen to the words they say and I judge them on the words that they say and the actions they take. I'm not going to judge somebody. I'm not going to hold anything against anybody because of the way they talk. And his response was 100% reasonable. 100%. He said he would have gladly put the flags at half-staff had he gotten an official request. The president can't just go around D.C. and put all the flags at half-staff because he hears something on the news. There's a whole process of submitting a request to do something like this. He's not in charge of all of that kind of stuff. You know, the architect of the Capitol and all these kinds of departments, there has to be a request that goes through. The exact same way that they put their requests through when they want to put flags at half-staff. They have to fill out forms and do paperwork and talk to the correct people and request it from them. He doesn't have the power. The president does not have the power to just say, hey, put all the flags at half-staff. That's not his role. That's not part of his office's duties. They have to submit requests to the appropriate people. He never got a request for the Melissa Hortman thing. And he said, had I gotten one, I would have been glad. He repeated himself twice. But let's see how these so-called leftist downers try to manipulate everything just to pick on everything because there's nothing for them to pick on.
Now, this is really the moment when the entire narrative should shatter. Now, Donald Trump gave a non-answer. He always gives a non-answer. You know, he
didn't give a non-answer. Can you not speak fucking English, David? Please. You do good content sometimes. You do good journalism sometimes. But stop with this fucking so-called leftist downer bullshit. Find an issue. Do something positive. This is all the fucking so-called left downers are doing. Imagine being a leftist that wants to address issues. And we have nothing but media and characters in our so-called space, on our so-called side of the aisle, that are picking on the color of the shirt that someone's wearing. Like, what are you, in fucking kindergarten? This is how it is for us leftists. This is what we're left with. That's why I started this channel. I want to talk about context, content, policies, actions. I don't care how... I could sit here and make fun of how Trump talks all day long. Why? Why would I waste my time? Why would I waste your time? So, that's where we're at, folks. See you in the next video.